Hello there, you're listening to The Planet's Memory, where time breathes and the Earth remembers. Close your eyes and imagine a world before memory, a time when the Earth was young and the stars whispered secrets that have long been forgotten. Picture a civilization so advanced, so mysterious, that their very existence challenges everything we thought we knew about human history. Tonight, as you drift into the gentle embrace of sleep, let us journey together through the mists of time to explore a question that has haunted scholars, dreamers, and seekers of truth for generations. Did the first civilization, those architects of time itself, shape the course of human destiny in ways we are only now beginning to understand? This is a story written in stone and starlight, carved into the bones of the earth and hidden in the whispers of ancient winds. It is a tale of impossible knowledge, of monuments that defy explanation, and of a wisdom so profound that it seems to have come from beyond the boundaries of our world. As the night wraps around you like a warm blanket and your breathing slows to match the rhythm of the ages, allow yourself to wonder, to question, and to explore the possibility that our ancestors were not primitive wanderers stumbling through the darkness, but brilliant minds who understood the cosmos in ways we have yet to reclaim. The story begins not with answers, but with questions that echo through the corridors of time like footsteps in an empty temple. Who were these people who came before recorded history, before the written word, before the kingdoms we read about in textbooks? Were they simply hunters and gatherers as we have been taught, or were they something far more extraordinary? The evidence scattered across our planet suggests a narrative far different from the one we learnt in school. A story of sophistication and understanding that seems impossible for people who supposedly lived in caves and struggled to survive each day. From the sun-baked deserts of Egypt to the misty highlands of Peru, from the dense jungles of Cambodia to the windswept plains of England, we find structures and artifacts that whisper of a forgotten age when humanity possessed knowledge that would later be lost to the ravages of time. These are not mere piles of rocks or simple dwellings. They are precision-engineered marvels that align with celestial bodies, incorporate mathematical constants we did not officially discover until thousands of years later, and demonstrate construction techniques that modern engineers struggle to explain even with our advanced technology. Consider for a moment the Great Pyramid of Giza, standing proud against the endless Egyptian sky for more than 4,000 years. We are told it was built as a tomb for a pharaoh, constructed by workers using copper tools and wooden ramps. Yet when we examine this monument with clear eyes and open minds, we encounter mysteries that refuse to fit neatly into this conventional explanation. The pyramid contains approximately 2.3 million blocks of stone, each weighing between 2 and 70 tons. Some of the granite blocks in the king's chamber weigh as much as 80 tons and were transported from quarries 500 miles away. The structure was built with such precision that the four sides of its base are aligned to the cardinal directions within a fraction of a single degree. The ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height equals 2 times pi, the mathematical constant that describes the relationship between a circle's circumference and its diameter. This means that the ancient builders encoded advanced mathematical knowledge into their architecture, knowledge that we attribute to Greek mathematicians who lived 2,000 years after the pyramid was supposedly constructed. As you settle deeper into comfort and your mind begins to wander through the landscape of dreams, let us explore the possibility that the Great Pyramid was never meant to be a tomb at all. No mummy has ever been found inside it. No hieroglyphics adorn its interior walls, which is unusual for an Egyptian royal burial site where the deceased would need prayers and spells to guide them through the afterlife. Instead, we find chambers and passageways that seem designed for purposes we do not fully understand, constructed with an accuracy that would be impressive even by today's standards. The shafts that extend from the king's chamber point precisely towards specific stars that held significance in ancient Egyptian cosmology. The entire structure appears to be a three-dimensional expression of astronomical and mathematical knowledge, a monument to human understanding rather than a simple grave. Some researchers have suggested that the pyramid might have functioned as an astronomical observatory, a power plant harnessing the Earth's natural energies, or even a machine designed for purposes beyond our current comprehension. While these theories remain controversial, they emerge from a genuine attempt to explain features that do not align with the tomb hypothesis. But the Great Pyramid is merely one thread in a vast tapestry of ancient mysteries that spans the entire globe. Travel with your mind's eye now to the highlands of Peru, where the ancient city of Machu Picchu clings to a mountain ridge high above the sacred valley. This extraordinary site was built by the Inca civilization, or so we believe, using techniques that baffle modern stonemasons. The walls of Machu Picchu are constructed from massive blocks of granite that fit together so perfectly that you cannot slide a piece of paper between them. No mortar binds these stones together, yet they have withstood centuries of earthquakes in one of the most seismically active regions on Earth. The blocks are not simple rectangles, but complex three-dimensional puzzles, each stone carved with multiple angles and curves that interlock with its neighbours in ways that distribute stress and absorb the shock of tremors. How did the Inca, who supposedly had no iron tools and no knowledge of the wheel, quarry these enormous stones, transport them up steep mountain slopes, and shape them with such incredible precision that our best modern tools would struggle to replicate their work? The mystery deepens when we examine the even older structures in the region, particularly at Sacsayhuaman, the massive stone fortress overlooking the city of Cusco. Here we find the largest stones used in any ancient construction in the Americas, with some blocks weighing more than 200 tons. These megalithic stones are fitted together with such skill that their surfaces seem to flow into one another like melted wax. The Spanish conquistadors who first saw these walls believed they must have been constructed by demons or giants, because mere humans could not possibly have accomplished such a feat. Local legends tell of a time before the Inca when a different people inhabited these lands, a civilization that possessed knowledge of softening stone, of making the very rock malleable like clay. While such stories sound like fantasy, they persist across generations, suggesting that they might contain kernels of truth wrapped in the language of myth. What if the ancestors of the Inca inherited these sites from an earlier culture, one that possessed technological or scientific knowledge that was later lost? What if the Inca themselves did not fully understand how these structures were built, but maintained and added to them as best they could? Let your breathing slow and your thoughts drift gently as we journey across the Pacific Ocean to the remote island of Easter Island, one of the most isolated inhabited places on Earth. Here, scattered across the landscape, stand nearly 900 massive stone statues called moai. Silent sentinels gazing across the ocean with their backs to the sea. These monolithic figures, carved from volcanic rock, stand as tall as 30 feet and weigh up to 80 tons. The people of Easter Island, the Rapa Nui, created these statues according to conventional history, but the methods they used to transport them from the quarry to their final positions remain hotly debated. The island had no large animals, no wheels, and limited resources. How did a small population on an isolated island create and move these enormous monuments? Local tradition speaks of the moai walking to their destinations through the power of mana, a spiritual energy. While we might dismiss this as superstition, recent experiments have shown that with ropes and careful manipulation, the statues can indeed be walked in a rocking motion. Perhaps the legends preserved actual knowledge in metaphorical form, describing a technique that to observers might have seemed magical. The mystery of Easter Island extends beyond the statues themselves to questions about the island's history and the fate of its people. When Europeans first arrived in the 18th century, they found the island largely deforested with a population much smaller than it once had been. The conventional narrative describes an ecological disaster caused by overpopulation and deforestation, a cautionary tale of resource mismanagement. However, some researchers have questioned this interpretation, pointing to evidence of contact with other civilizations and suggesting that Easter Island might have been part of a larger network of ancient seafaring cultures that navigated the Pacific Ocean long before European explorers. The Rapa Nui possessed a unique writing system called Rongorongo, one of only a handful of independent writing systems ever developed in human history. These wooden tablets covered in intricate glyphs remain largely undeciphered, their secrets locked away perhaps forever, since most were destroyed by missionaries who viewed them as pagan artifacts. What knowledge was recorded on those tablets? What stories and histories were lost when they were burned or thrown into the sea? As the night deepens and sleep draws closer, imagine travelling now to the jungles of Cambodia, where the temple complex of Angkor Wat rises from the forest floor like a vision from another world. This massive structure, built in the 12th century, is the largest religious monument ever constructed, covering an area of over 400 acres. Its 5 towers represent the peaks of Mount Meru, the home of the gods in Hindu and Buddhist cosmology, while the surrounding moat symbolises the cosmic ocean. What captures the imagination of researchers, however, is not just the temple's size and beauty, but the sophisticated astronomical alignments built into its design. During the spring equinox, an observer standing at the western entrance of the temple sees the sun rise directly over the central tower. The temple's proportions and measurements encode mathematical relationships found in Vedic texts, and the bas-reliefs covering its walls depict astronomical events and time cycles, spanning millions of years. The ancient Khmer builders possessed knowledge of astronomy and mathematics that allowed them to create a structure that functions as both temple and cosmic diagram, a map of the universe rendered in stone. Yet Angkor Wat is merely the crown jewel of a vast urban complex that once supported a population of nearly 1 million people, making it one of the largest pre-industrial cities in the world. The entire region is laced with a sophisticated system of canals, reservoirs and water management infrastructure that controlled the flow of monsoon rains and provided water for agriculture throughout the year. Recent analysis using satellite technology and ground-penetrating radar has revealed that the urban sprawl of Angkor extended far beyond what archaeologists previously believed, covering an area larger than modern Los Angeles. How did a civilization flourishing in the medieval period possess the engineering knowledge to build such advanced hydraulic systems? Where did they acquire the mathematical and astronomical understanding evident in their temples? The conventional answer points to Indian influence through trade and cultural exchange, but this explanation feels incomplete when we consider the sophistication and scale of what was achieved. The ancient stones scattered across our world hold memories that stretch back beyond the reach of written history, beyond the oldest tales passed down through generations, into a time that exists now only in fragments and shadows. These monuments stand as silent witnesses to human achievement that seems to defy the timeline we've constructed for ourselves, challenging our understanding of who we were and what we were capable of achieving thousands of years ago. When we look at these structures with fresh eyes, setting aside the assumptions we have inherited from textbooks and teachers, we begin to see patterns that suggest a level of coordination and knowledge that should not have existed in the ancient world according to our current historical models. The stones speak of mathematics and astronomy, of engineering and organization, of cultures that possessed wisdom we have only recently begun to rediscover through our modern scientific instruments and methods. Consider the simple act of moving stone, something that seems straightforward in our age of cranes and trucks and hydraulic machinery. We can lift hundreds of tons with the press of a button, transport materials across continents with ease, and construct buildings that scrape the sky. Yet when we stand before the monuments left by ancient peoples, we find ourselves humbled and confused by the realization that they accomplished similar feats without any of the technology we consider essential. The blocks that form the foundation of the Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek in Lebanon include 3 stones that each weigh approximately 800 tons, making them among the largest building blocks ever used in any structure in history. These trilithon stones were quarried, transported, and lifted into place with such precision that they fit perfectly into the wall, creating a foundation that has endured for thousands of years. Modern engineers have calculated that moving stones of this size would require sophisticated equipment and careful planning even with today's technology, yet somehow ancient builders accomplished this task using methods that remain mysterious to us. The quarry where these stones originated lies a short distance from the temple site, and there we find an even larger block that was never finished and never moved. This stone, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighs approximately 1,000 tons and remains partially attached to the bedrock, abandoned for reasons we can only guess. Standing beside this colossal block, running your hand along its smooth surface, you cannot help but wonder about the minds that conceived of moving such a massive object and the techniques they believed would allow them to accomplish this seemingly impossible task. What drove them to work with stones of such extraordinary size when smaller blocks would have served the same practical purpose? Was it simply a demonstration of power and capability? A way of proclaiming to future generations that they possessed knowledge and skills worthy of remembrance? Or did the size of these stones serve some function we do not yet understand? Some purpose related to the structure's role that goes beyond simple construction? As your eyes grow heavy and your body relaxes into the comfort of rest, let your mind wander to the island of Malta in the Mediterranean Sea, where temples older than the pyramids of Egypt rise from the rocky soil. The megalithic temples of Malta date back more than 5,000 years, making them among the oldest freestanding structures in the world. These temples were not simple shelters but sophisticated buildings featuring multiple chambers, elaborate stonework, and acoustic properties that suggest they were designed for specific purposes related to sound and ritual. The temples of Azara Khaim and Manajra are aligned to capture the light of the rising sun during the equinoxes and solstices, transforming the interior spaces into theatres of light and shadow that mark the turning of the seasons. The people who built these temples had no writing system that we know of, no metal tools, and lived in a time we associate with the earlier stages of agriculture and settled life. Yet, they possessed the organisational capacity to quarry and move stones weighing many tons, the mathematical knowledge to align their buildings with celestial events, and the artistic skill to carve intricate decorations into the limestone blocks. The mystery of Malta's temples deepens when we examine the methods used to construct them, and the society that must have existed to support such building projects. Creating these monuments would have required a large workforce, specialised knowledge passed down through generations, and the agricultural surplus to feed people who were engaged in construction rather than farming. This implies a level of social organisation and stability that we do not usually associate with such early periods of human development. The temples were used for centuries, modified and expanded over time, suggesting continuity of purpose and cultural memory that spanned many generations. Then, quite suddenly in archaeological terms, the temple building stopped. The sites were abandoned, and the people who created them vanished from history, leaving behind only their stone monuments and a handful of artifacts that offer tantalizing but incomplete clues about their beliefs and practices. What happened to the temple builders of Malta? Did they succumb to disease, environmental change, or invasion? Or did they simply move on, carrying their knowledge to other lands where it might have influenced other cultures in ways we have not yet traced? Let us drift now to the British Isles, where ancient peoples raise great circles of standing stones across the landscape, creating monuments that have captured human imagination for thousands of years. Stonehenge is the most famous of these stone circles, a structure so iconic that it has become synonymous with ancient mystery and prehistoric achievement. The monument consists of massive sarsen stones arranged in a circular formation, topped with horizontal lintels that were carefully shaped and fitted together using mortise and tenon joints, a sophisticated woodworking technique applied to stone. Inside this outer circle stand smaller bluestones, rocks that originated from the Preseli Hills in Wales more than 150 miles away. These stones, weighing up to 4 tons each, were transported across hills, rivers and possibly by sea to reach their final destination at Stonehenge. Why did the builders go to such extraordinary effort to bring these specific stones from such a great distance when suitable rocks could be found much closer? Did the blue stones possess some special significance, some quality or property that made them essential to the monument's purpose? Stonehenge was not built all at once, but developed over many centuries, with different phases of construction spanning more than 1,000 years. The earliest feature of the site is a circular ditch and bank dating back nearly 5,000 years, created by people using nothing more than antlers as picks and shoulder blades of cattle as shovels. Later generations added the standing stones, aligned them with solar and lunar events, and created an increasingly complex monument that served purposes we still debate. Some researchers believe Stonehenge functioned as an astronomical observatory, a tool for tracking the movements of the sun and moon and predicting eclipses. Others suggest it was a healing temple where people came seeking cures for ailments, pointing to the high number of burials found nearby showing signs of injury and disease. Still others propose it served as a place of ancestor worship, a sacred ground where the living could communicate with the dead and maintain connections with those who had passed beyond the veil. Perhaps it was all of these things at different times, its meaning and purpose evolving as generations of builders added their contributions to a monument that grew in significance and complexity. The landscape surrounding Stonehenge reveals an even larger picture of prehistoric activity and organization. The area is dotted with burial mounds, earthwork enclosures, and other stone structures that suggest this region held special importance for ancient peoples across a vast span of time. A few miles from Stonehenge stands Avebury, an even larger stone circle complex surrounded by a massive circular ditch and bank enclosure. The scale of Avebury is staggering, with the outer circle large enough to contain part of a modern village within its boundaries. The labour required to dig the ditch and raise the bank using only simple tools must have involved hundreds if not thousands of workers toiling for many years. What motivated such enormous collective efforts? How did prehistoric societies organise themselves to undertake projects that would not see completion within a single lifetime? These questions point towards social structures and cultural priorities that challenge our assumptions about life in the Stone Age, suggesting that our ancestors possessed forms of social organisation and shared purpose that we might not have given them credit for. As sleep begins to claim you and your breathing falls into the steady rhythm of rest, imagine travelling to the harsh and beautiful landscape of Turkey, where a discovery made in the 1990s forced archaeologists to reconsider their understanding of human development. Göbekli Tepe, a hilltop sanctuary in southeastern Turkey, dates back more than 11,000 years, making it older than agriculture, older than pottery, older than the wheel. According to our traditional narrative of human progress, hunter-gatherers living at this time should have been focused entirely on survival, moving from place to place in search of food, lacking the resources or organisational capacity for large-scale construction projects. Yet at Göbekli Tepe we find massive T-shaped pillars arranged in circular formations, some standing more than 16 feet tall and weighing up to 10 tons. These pillars are not rough stones but carefully carved monoliths, decorated with intricate reliefs showing animals, abstract symbols and mysterious figures that might represent gods or spirits or concepts we can no longer comprehend. The implications of Göbekli Tepe shake the foundations of archaeological theory. because the site suggests that complex ritual and monument building preceded the development of agriculture rather than following it, as we had always assumed. For decades, scholars believed that humans first domesticated plants and animals, then settled into villages, and only after establishing stable agricultural societies did they have the time and resources to build temples and create art. Göbekli Tepe turns this sequence upside down, showing that people who still lived by hunting and gathering were capable of creating sophisticated monuments, and presumably the religious or social systems that motivated such construction. Some researchers now propose that the need to gather regularly at sites like Göbekli Tepe for rituals and ceremonies might have been one of the driving forces behind the development of agriculture, as groups needed to produce food surpluses to feed the people who gathered for these events. If this theory is correct, then religion and ritual might have played a more central role in human development than we previously understood, shaping the very foundations of civilization itself. The pillars of Göbekli Tepe were deliberately buried around 8,000 years ago, carefully covered with soil and rubble in a process that must have required as much effort as their original construction. Why would people go to such trouble to hide these monuments? Were they covering up something they feared, preserving something they valued, or marking the end of one era and the beginning of another? The site raises far more questions than it answers, offering us a glimpse into a world that existed at the very dawn of human civilization, a time when our ancestors were making the transition from mobile hunter-gatherers to settled farmers, when new ways of thinking about the world and our place in it were emerging. The animals carved into the pillars include lions, foxes, snakes, scorpions, and birds, creatures that held symbolic meaning we can only guess at. Some researchers see in these carvings evidence of shamanistic practices, of beliefs that certain individuals could communicate with the spirit world or transform themselves into animals. Others interpret the symbols as astronomical markers, encoding knowledge about the movements of constellations and the cycles of the cosmos. Let your mind drift now to a different kind of mystery, one written not in stone, but on paper and parchment, maps that show knowledge that should not have existed when they were created. The history of cartography tells us that ancient and medieval peoples had limited understanding of the world's true geography, that they believed the earth was flat, that they knew only the land immediately surrounding them, and filled the rest of their maps with speculation and fantasy. Yet scattered through history we find maps that contradict this comfortable narrative, charts that display accurate knowledge of coastlines and islands and even continents that were supposedly unknown to the civilizations that produced them. These anomalous maps have sparked debates that continue to this day, with some researchers dismissing them as coincidences or misinterpretations, while others see them as evidence of ancient exploration and knowledge that was later lost and forgotten. The Piri Reis map is perhaps the most famous of these controversial documents, a world map created in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis. The map shows the coasts of Europe, Africa, and the Americas with remarkable accuracy for its time, but what has generated the most discussion is the depiction of the coastline at the bottom of the map. Some researchers have argued that this section shows the coast of Antarctica as it would appear without ice, something that should have been impossible, since Antarctica was not officially discovered until 1820, more than 3 centuries after the map was drawn, and the continent has been covered by ice for millions of years. Piri Reis himself noted on the map that he compiled it from various older sources, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, suggesting that he had access to ancient charts that preserved geographical knowledge from earlier civilizations. If this interpretation is correct, then we must ask how anyone could have mapped Antarctica without ice, and what civilization possessed the naval capability and geographical knowledge to explore and chart such distant lands in antiquity. Skeptics point out that the identification of the southern coastline with Antarctica is not universally accepted, and that the map might simply show the coast of South America extended and distorted through errors in copying and compilation. Maps from this period often contained inaccuracies and distortions, and we should be careful about reading too much into features that might have mundane explanations. Yet the debate over the Piri race map highlights a larger pattern of ancient maps that seem to contain information that challenges our understanding of what ancient peoples knew about the world. The Orontius Phineus map from 1531 also appears to show Antarctica, this time centered on the South Pole and displaying features such as mountains and rivers. The shape and position of the continent on this map bear some resemblance to the actual outline of Antarctica as revealed by modern surveys, though again skeptics argue that this could be coincidence or wishful thinking by those who want to find mystery where none exists. As you sink deeper into the peaceful embrace of sleep, consider the possibility that the Earth has been explored and mapped many times throughout history, that civilizations rose and fell and rose again, each time losing some of the knowledge accumulated by their predecessors. The cycles of human achievement might not follow the simple upward trajectory we like to imagine, with each generation building steadily on the accomplishments of the last. Instead, history might be marked by periods of advancement followed by catastrophic declines, dark ages when libraries burned and knowledge was lost, leaving only fragments and shadows for later generations to puzzle over. The ancient Library of Alexandria, the greatest repository of knowledge in the classical world, was destroyed over the course of several centuries through fire, neglect and deliberate destruction, taking with it hundreds of thousands of scrolls containing the accumulated wisdom of ages. How much geographical knowledge might have been stored in that library? How many maps and sailing charts from ancient explorers were lost when the flames consumed the shelves? The possibility of ancient global exploration finds support in unexpected places, from the discovery of Roman coins in America to the presence of cocaine and tobacco residues in Egyptian mummies, despite these plants being native only to the Americas. While many archaeologists dismiss such findings as contamination or hoaxes, others see them as tantalizing hints of contact between civilizations that we believe had no knowledge of each other. Ancient texts from various cultures contain descriptions of distant lands and sea voyages that might preserve memories of actual explorations. The Phoenicians, those master sailors of the ancient Mediterranean, were said to have circumnavigated Africa around 600 BCE, a voyage described by the Greek historian Herodotus, who noted that the sailors claimed the sun was on their right side as they travelled west around the southern cape, a detail that actually supports the authenticity of the account, since this would indeed be the case in the southern hemisphere. If the Phoenicians could sail around Africa, what other voyages might they have accomplished that went unrecorded, or whose records have been lost? The question of ancient seafaring capabilities leads us to consider the vessels and navigation techniques available to early maritime cultures. We often underestimate what could be accomplished with ancient ship designs, assuming that wooden vessels powered by oars and simple sails could not have undertaken long ocean voyages. Yet experimental archaeology has demonstrated that replicas of ancient ships are quite capable of crossing oceans when properly handled by skilled crews. The Kon-Tiki expedition in 1947 showed that a balsa raft based on pre-Columbian designs could sail from South America to Polynesia, proving that such journeys were physically possible even if we have no definitive proof they actually occurred in ancient times. More recently, researchers have built replicas of Bronze Age boats and successfully sailed them across substantial stretches of open ocean, demonstrating that ancient peoples had the technology needed for long-distance maritime exploration if they had the motivation and knowledge to attempt such voyages. Navigation without modern instruments seems impossible to us, yet ancient sailors developed sophisticated methods for finding their way across featureless seas. By observing the sun and stars, tracking the patterns of waves and currents, watching the flight of birds and the colour of water, skilled navigators could determine their position and direction with impressive accuracy. The Polynesian peoples navigated across thousands of miles of Pacific Ocean, discovering and settling remote islands using only traditional wayfinding techniques passed down through generations. These navigators memorized vast amounts of information about star positions at different times of year, the patterns of ocean swells, the locations of islands beyond the horizon, all held in memory and transmitted through teaching and practice. If the Polynesians could accomplish such feats of navigation, might not other ancient cultures have developed similar skills? Could there have been networks of trade and exploration spanning the globe long before the age of discovery, leaving only faint traces in the archaeological record? Allow the gentle pull of sleep to carry you now into the realm of astronomy, where ancient peoples gazed up at the night sky and saw not just points of light, but a vast cosmic clock, a calendar written in the movements of celestial bodies. The night sky held profound importance for ancient civilizations, providing not just navigation but the ability to track time, predict seasons, and organize agricultural activities around the cycles of planting and harvest. Yet when we examine the astronomical knowledge encoded in ancient monuments and texts, we find understanding that seems remarkably sophisticated, mathematical calculations and observations that required centuries of careful record keeping, and a level of dedication to astronomy that challenges our view of ancient priorities and capabilities. These ancient sky watchers not only observed the obvious movements of the sun and moon, but tracked planets, identified constellations, predicted eclipses, and recognized cycles that span decades or even centuries. The ancient Maya civilization of Central America developed one of the most accurate calendars ever created, a system that tracked multiple cycles simultaneously and could calculate dates thousands of years into the past or future with remarkable precision. The Maya calendar was actually a set of interlocking calendars that measured time in different ways, from the 260-day sacred calendar to the 360-day sacred calendar to the 360-day sacred calendar to the 360-day sacred. Day, solar year to the long count that tracked vast spans of time measured in units called bactums, each lasting approximately 394 years. The Maya obsession with time and calendrics drove them to become careful astronomical observers, building structures specifically designed to mark significant celestial events. At Chichen Itza, the pyramid known as El Castillo creates a shadow display during the equinoxes where the angle of the sun casts triangular shadows along the northern staircase, creating the illusion of a serpent descending from the top of the pyramid. This effect is no accident, but a deliberately engineered demonstration of astronomical knowledge encoded in architecture. The Maya tracked the planet Venus with particular care, recognizing that its appearances and disappearances followed predictable cycles and recording these movements in their codices. The Dresden Codex, one of the few Maya manuscripts to survive the Spanish conquest, contains tables tracking Venus over a period of many centuries, with calculations so accurate that they differ from modern astronomical values by only a tiny fraction. Why did the Maya invest such enormous effort in tracking Venus? The planet held religious significance, associated with the god Kukulkan, and believed to influence warfare and other important activities. But beyond the religious explanations, the Maya pursuit of astronomical knowledge suggests a culture that valued understanding the cosmos, that saw knowledge of celestial mechanics as worthy of the highest intellectual effort. Their calendar system was not just a practical tool but a philosophical statement about the nature of time, a way of situating human existence within vast cosmic cycles that dwarfed individual lives and even entire civilizations. As your breathing slows and consciousness begins to fade, travel in your mind to ancient Mesopotamia where priest astronomers climbed ziggurats to observe the heavens and record the movements of celestial bodies on clay tablets. The Babylonians developed sophisticated mathematical astronomy, creating tables that could predict the positions of planets and the timing of eclipses with impressive accuracy. These predictions required not just observations, but mathematical models that could account for the complex paths planets trace across the sky, their periods of retrograde motion when they appear to move backward against the background of stars. The Babylonian astronomers recognized that celestial events followed regular cycles, and by tracking these cycles over many generations, they accumulated enough data to recognize patterns and make predictions. The knowledge they developed was not purely theoretical, but had practical applications in astrology. The belief that celestial events influenced earthly affairs and that by understanding the heavens one could gain insight into the future. The ancient Greeks inherited astronomical knowledge from both the Babylonians and the Egyptians, refining and extending it through philosophical inquiry and mathematical reasoning. Greek astronomers proposed that the Earth was round at a time when this idea was far from obvious, providing evidence based on the shape of the Earth's shadow during lunar eclipses and the way ships disappear over the horizon hole first. Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the Earth around 240 BCE, using nothing more than the angle of shadows at noon in two different cities and the distance between them, arriving at a figure remarkably close to the modern value. This achievement demonstrates not just observational skill, but the application of geometric reasoning to solve practical problems, showing that ancient scientists possessed both the theoretical knowledge and the experimental approach that we associate with modern science. Aristarchus proposed a heliocentric model of the solar system, suggesting that the Earth and other planets orbit the Sun, though this idea was rejected by most ancient astronomers in favour of the geocentric model that placed the Earth at the centre. The precision of ancient astronomical observations and calculations raises intriguing questions about the instruments and methods available to these early scientists. We know that ancient peoples used devices such as the gnomon, a simple vertical stick whose shadow could be used to track the sun's movement, and the astrolabe, a sophisticated instrument for measuring the positions of stars and planets. But some of the accuracy achieved in ancient observations seems to require instruments more sophisticated than the simple tools we know about from archaeological finds and historical descriptions. Did ancient astronomers possess devices that have not survived or whose purposes we do not recognize? The Antikythera mechanism, a complex clockwork device recovered from a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera, demonstrates that ancient peoples were capable of creating mechanical computers of astonishing sophistication. This bronze device, dating from around 100 BCE, contains dozens of interlocking gears that model the movements of the sun, moon and planets, predicting eclipses and tracking calendrical cycles. When it was first discovered and studied, scientists could barely believe that such a device could have been created in antiquity, as it seemed to represent a level of mechanical engineering that we associate with much later periods. Let your mind drift gently as we consider that the Antikythera mechanism might not be unique, that it might represent a tradition of mechanical astronomy that was more widespread than the survival of a single example would suggest. How many other such devices were created and lost over the centuries? What other technologies did ancient peoples develop that left no trace in the archaeological record because they were made from materials that decay or because they were melted down and reused when the knowledge of how to operate them was lost? The history of technology is not a smooth progression but a series of advances and retreats, with knowledge sometimes being lost and later rediscovered. The recipe for making Roman concrete, which produced structures of remarkable durability that still stand today, was lost during the Middle Ages, and only recently have we begun to understand the chemical processes that made it so effective. If we could lose something as practical and useful as concrete technology, what other knowledge might have been lost from earlier periods? In the quiet space between waking and sleeping, let us explore the symbols and writings left by ancient peoples. Mysterious marks carved into stone and painted on cave walls that preserve messages we struggle to understand. Writing itself is one of humanity's greatest inventions, a technology that allows thoughts and knowledge to be preserved beyond the lifespan of individuals, creating cultural memory that can span generations and centuries. The invention of writing appears independently in several different regions around the world, suggesting that human societies reach a point in their development where the need to record information becomes pressing enough that someone conceives of a system for doing so. Yet the earliest writing systems often appear suddenly in the archaeological record, emerging not in simple primitive forms that gradually develop, but as sophisticated systems that seem to spring into existence nearly fully formed. This pattern has led some researchers to wonder whether writing might be even older than we know, with earlier developmental stages that have not survived or have not yet been discovered. The cuneiform script of ancient Mesopotamia, one of the world's oldest writing systems, first appears around 3200 BCE in the form of pictographic symbols pressed into clay tablets. Within a few centuries, this system evolved into a sophisticated script capable of representing complex grammatical structures and abstract concepts, used to record everything from business transactions to epic poetry. The Sumerians who developed cuneiform also possessed advanced mathematical knowledge, including a base D60 system that we still use today when we measure time in 6060, minute hours and 60-second minutes, or divide circles into 360 degrees. Where did this sophisticated mathematical system come from? The Sumerians themselves attributed their knowledge to the gods, to divine beings who had taught humanity the arts of civilization. While we can dismiss this as mythology, it preserves a cultural memory that knowledge came from somewhere, that it was received rather than slowly developed, a theme that appears in the origin stories of many ancient cultures. Egyptian hieroglyphics present a similar pattern, appearing suddenly in the archaeological record around 3200 BCE, as a fully developed writing system capable of complex expression. The hieroglyphic script remained in use for more than 3,000 years, one of the longest-lived writing systems in history, maintaining its basic character even as the spoken language evolved around it. The ancient Egyptians used hieroglyphics primarily for religious and monumental purposes, considering the written word to possess magical power, with the symbols themselves believed to contain the essence of the things they represented. This attitude toward writing as sacred and powerful appears in many ancient cultures, suggesting that the invention of writing was viewed not just as a practical tool but as a profound shift in human capabilities, a way of capturing thought and making it permanent, of speaking across time to future generations who would read words long after the writer had passed from the world. As sleep draws you deeper into its gentle embrace, consider the mystery of scripts that remain undeciphered. Writing systems whose meanings died with the cultures that created them, leaving us with texts we can see but not read. The Indus Valley script used by the Harappan civilization of ancient India and Pakistan appears on thousands of seals, pottery and other artifacts, but despite decades of effort by linguists and cryptographers, no one has succeeded in deciphering it. We do not even know what language it represents or what kind of writing system it is. The shortness of most Indus inscriptions, typically just a few symbols, makes decipherment particularly challenging since there is not enough text to recognize patterns and test hypotheses about grammar and meaning. The failure to read the Indus script means that an entire civilization remains silent to us, unable to speak across the centuries to tell us about their beliefs, their history, their knowledge. We can study their cities, their art, their trade networks, but without their words we miss the inner life of the culture, the thoughts and concerns of the people themselves. Linear A, the script used by the Minoan civilization of ancient Crete, presents a similar puzzle. While we have successfully deciphered Linear B, the script used by the later Mycenaean Greeks, Linear A remains unread despite appearing to use a similar writing system. The problem is that Linear B could be decoded because we knew it represented an early form of Greek, a language we understand, while Linear A apparently writes a language that is unknown to us. making the task of decipherment vastly more difficult. Some researchers believe Linear A might represent a language isolate, a tongue with no living relatives, which would mean that even if we could determine how the script worked, we would still struggle to understand what the words meant without a bilingual text or extensive context. The Minoans left beautiful artifacts and impressive architecture, but their voices remain locked in symbols we cannot interpret, their stories untold. The mystery deepens when we consider symbols and markings that might not be writing at all, but still clearly carry meaning. Across Europe, prehistoric peoples carved spiral patterns, concentric circles, cup marks, and other geometric designs into rocks and stones, creating a landscape of symbols whose purposes remain enigmatic. These petroglyphs appear remarkably similar across vast distances, suggesting either shared symbolism or independent development of similar visual languages. Some researchers propose that these markings had astronomical significance, mapping the movements of celestial bodies, or marking the positions where sun or moon rise at specific times of year. Others suggest they served ritual purposes, marking sacred sites or boundaries, perhaps functioning as signs that declared the presence of spirits or ancestors. Still others wonder if they might be a form of proto-writing, a system of visual communication that stopped short of representing spoken language but still conveyed information in standardized ways. Let your thoughts drift like clouds as we consider the possibility that knowledge can be preserved in forms other than writing, that ancient peoples might have encoded information in symbols, structures, and stories that we interpret as art or mythology, but which might originally have served as mnemonic devices or teaching tools. Indigenous cultures around the world developed sophisticated oral traditions that preserved detailed knowledge across many generations without written texts, using stories, songs, and rituals as vehicles for transmitting information. Aboriginal Australians maintained oral histories extending back thousands of years, with stories that preserve accurate memories of geographical features that have been submerged since the end of the last ice age. When these stories are compared to geological evidence, they prove to be remarkably accurate accounts of events that occurred 10,000 years ago or more, passed down through more than 300 generations of storytelling. If such knowledge can survive in oral tradition, what other information might be preserved in myths and legends that we dismiss as fantasy? As you rest in perfect comfort and your mind wanders through landscapes of dream and memory, let us explore the possibility that the ancients built great cities that have vanished beneath the waves, lost to rising seas at the end of the last ice age, when enormous quantities of water locked in glaciers melted and returned to the oceans, raising sea levels by hundreds of feet. The coastlines of the world once lay far from their present positions, with vast expanses of land now submerged beneath shallow seas. During the Ice Age, when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower than today, much of the Earth's continental shelf was exposed as dry land, providing habitable territory that has since been drowned by the rising waters. If early human civilizations developed in coastal regions, as many cultures have throughout history, then the evidence of their existence might now lie underwater, hidden from us by the very seas they once gazed upon from shore. The ancient legend of Atlantis told by the Greek philosopher Plato describes a powerful maritime civilization that sank beneath the waves in a single day and night of catastrophic destruction. Plato claimed to have heard the story from his ancestor Solon, who learned it from Egyptian priests who preserved records going back thousands of years before Plato's time. According to the account, Atlantis was a large island in the Atlantic Ocean beyond the Pillars of Hercules, ruled by kings descended from the god Poseidon, possessing advanced technology and exerting power over much of the Mediterranean world before divine punishment destroyed the island and its people. For centuries, readers have debated whether Atlantis was a real place or a philosophical fiction created by Plato to illustrate points about government and society. The search for Atlantis has led adventurers and researchers to explore numerous locations around the world, from the Azores to Antarctica, from the Caribbean to Indonesia, with each generation proposing new candidates for the location of the lost continent. Most scholars dismiss Atlantis as pure invention, arguing that Plato created the story as an allegory, and that searching for a real Atlantis misses the point of what he was trying to accomplish. Yet the story touches something deep in human imagination, the idea that civilizations can rise to great heights and then fall into destruction, that knowledge can be lost, that the world once contained wonders we can barely imagine. If we set aside the specific details of Plato's account and ask a more general question about whether advanced civilizations existed in prehistory and then disappeared, we find ourselves in more interesting territory. The end of the last ice age was a time of dramatic environmental change, with coastlines shifting, climates transforming, and mass extinctions eliminating many large animal species. Any human populations living in coastal regions would have been forced to relocate as the seas rose, abandoning settlements and agricultural lands to the advancing waters. In such chaos, social structures could have collapsed, knowledge could have been lost, and survivors could have been forced to rebuild from simpler foundations, carrying forward only fragments of what had come before. As your breathing settles into the peaceful rhythm of deep relaxation, imagine divers descending into blue waters off the coast of Japan, discovering the Yonaguni Monument, a massive underwater rock formation featuring sharp angles, straight edges, and flat surfaces that some researchers believe could not have formed naturally. The structure resembles a stepped pyramid with terraces, ramps, and what appear to be carved features. Since its discovery in 1986, the Yonaguni Monument has sparked intense debate between those who see it as a man-made structure and those who argue it is simply an unusual natural formation shaped by geological processes. The formation would have been above water during the Ice Age when sea levels were lower, meaning that if it is indeed artificial, it would be at least 10,000 years old, predating any known civilization in the region. Geologists who have studied the site note that the rocks of Yonaguni tend to fracture along straight lines, potentially explaining the geometric appearance without requiring human intervention. Yet the presence of what appear to be tool marks, carved animals, and other features difficult to attribute to natural processes keeps the debate alive. Similar underwater structures and formations have been reported from waters around the world, from the Gulf of Cambay off the coast of India, where sonar surveys have detected what might be urban ruins, to the rock formations off the coast of Cuba that some researchers believe could be the remains of ancient buildings. In each case, the evidence remains controversial, with debate centered on whether the features in question are natural or artificial, and what age they might be if they were created by humans. The difficulty of underwater archaeology, the expense of mounting proper expeditions, and the challenges of dating submerged structures make it hard to resolve these questions definitively. Yet the fact that so much land area is now underwater means we should not be surprised if future discoveries reveal traces of human activity in places that are now beneath the sea. As technology improves and our ability to survey the ocean floor advances, we may well find evidence of settlements, harbours, and even cities that were abandoned as the seas rose at the end of the Ice Age. The Mediterranean Sea holds particular interest for underwater archaeologists because it was home to so many ancient civilizations and because its waters have submerged numerous harbours, buildings and artifacts over the millennia. In the waters off Alexandria, Egypt, divers have explored the submerged ruins of the ancient Pharos Lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, along with palaces, temples and statues that slipped into the sea due to earthquakes and subsidence. These discoveries remind us that even in historical times within the period covered by written records, important structures and entire sections of cities have been lost beneath the waves. If this can happen to the well-documented buildings of classical antiquity, how much more might have been lost from earlier periods when construction was less durable and records less complete? Every sunken harbour, every submerged settlement extends our understanding of the past and reminds us that the Earth's geography has not remained static, but continues to evolve through geological processes that reshape coastlines and alter the landscape. Let your mind rest easy as we consider that the ocean floor remains one of the least explored regions of our planet, with vast areas never surveyed in detail and many discoveries still waiting to be made. The development of new technologies such as autonomous underwater vehicles, high-resolution sonar, and satellite mapping systems is beginning to reveal the topology of the seafloor in unprecedented detail. Future surveys may well identify anomalous features that warrant closer investigation, potentially revealing evidence of human activity in areas that were above water during the Ice Age. Even if we do not find lost civilizations of the sort imagined in legends, we will certainly expand our knowledge of how humans lived during those ancient times, where they settled, and how they responded to the environmental changes that reshaped their world. The seas hold memory in their depths, and as we develop better ways to explore underwater environments, we write new chapters in the story of human history, recovering knowledge that was thought lost forever. In the quiet darkness of the night as sleep wraps around you, let us consider the possibility that ancient peoples possess technologies we would not expect them to have, methods and tools that seem out of place in their time and that challenge our assumptions about the steady march of technological progress. Throughout history, we find artifacts and evidence of techniques that appear more sophisticated than the general technological level of the cultures that created them, suggesting either that those cultures were more advanced than we give them credit for, or that they inherited knowledge from earlier sources. These out-of-place artifacts, sometimes called ooparts, generate controversy and debate, with skeptics arguing that many examples are misunderstood, misidentified, or even hoaxes, while others see them as evidence of lost technologies that deserve serious investigation. The Baghdad Battery, discovered in 1936 near Baghdad, Iraq, consists of a clay jar containing a copper cylinder with an iron rod suspended inside. The assemblage dates to around 200 BCE to 200 CE, the Parthian or Sasanian period. When filled with an acidic liquid such as vinegar or wine, the device can generate a small electric current, leading to speculation that ancient peoples might have discovered electrochemistry more than 2,000 years ago. What would such a device have been used for? Some researchers have suggested it could have been used for electroplating, perhaps to coat objects with thin layers of gold, a technique that would explain how some ancient gold-plated artifacts achieved such even coatings. Others propose it might have been used for pain relief through electrical stimulation, a primitive form of the electrotherapy that modern medicine discovered in the 18th century. Skeptics point out that there is no evidence the device was actually used as a battery, and that its purpose might have been completely different. Perhaps simply a container for storing scrolls with the metal rod serving as a holder. The Antikythera mechanism which we encountered earlier stands as proof that at least some ancient technologies were far more sophisticated than we might expect. This device demonstrates that Greek craftsmen of the 1st century BCE could design and build complex gear systems capable of performing astronomical calculations, a level of mechanical engineering that we previously believed did not exist until the development of astronomical clocks in medieval Europe more than 1,000 years later. The mechanism's existence forces us to reconsider what else might have been possible in the ancient world, what other inventions and devices might have existed but not survived into the present. The gear-cutting technology required to create the Antikythera mechanism would have been applicable to many other purposes beyond astronomical calculation. Where else might similar mechanical devices have been used? Did ancient peoples create clocks, automata, or mechanical tools that have left no trace in the archaeological record? As your body grows heavy and your thoughts become softer and more dreamlike, Imagine ancient steam engines puffing and hissing in temples of the Roman Empire, not as sources of mechanical power, but as wondrous devices that amazed worshippers and demonstrated the power of the gods. The Aeolipile, invented by the Greek engineer Hero of Alexandria in the 1st century CE, was a hollow sphere mounted on a pipe that could rotate when steam jets were forced through bent tubes attached to the sphere. This device demonstrated the principle of steam propulsion, the same principle that would power the Industrial Revolution 1800 years later. Yet Hero and his contemporaries appear to have viewed the Aeolipile as a curiosity, a toy or theatrical device rather than a potential source of power that could transform civilization. Why did ancient peoples not develop steam power into practical engines for doing work? Did they lack the metallurgy needed to create boilers and pistons that could withstand the pressures required? Or did they simply not see the potential in the principles they had discovered, being content to use the technology for entertainment rather than industry? The question of why certain technologies developed when and where they did involves complex factors beyond just the existence of knowledge or capability. Societies develop technologies in response to needs and opportunities, and a technology that seems obvious in hindsight might not have appeared necessary or practical in its original context. Ancient societies had access to abundant slave labor, reducing the incentive to develop labor-saving machinery. The social structures and economic systems of antiquity did not reward the kind of technological innovation that became important in later periods. Additionally, the development of complex technologies often requires bringing together knowledge from multiple domains, and if that synthesis does not occur, the technology remains unrealized even though its components exist. The ancient world had the pieces needed for many technologies that would not be developed until much later, and this suggests that technological progress depends not just on knowledge but on the right combination of circumstances that makes innovation necessary and possible. Let your consciousness drift as we explore another category of enigmatic ancient artifacts, precisely machined objects that seem to require cutting and drilling techniques more advanced than what we believe ancient peoples possessed. In Egypt, archaeologists have found stone vessels carved from hard materials like granite and diorite, shaped with such precision and symmetry that modern craftspeople struggle to replicate them using traditional tools. The walls of some of these vessels are incredibly thin and uniform, the interiors hollowed out in ways that seem impossible without rotating machinery. Petrie, the pioneering Egyptologist who first studied these objects in detail, calculated that the drilling rates required to create some of the holes and cores found in hard stone would necessitate tremendous pressure, far more than could be applied by hand. He speculated that ancient Egyptian craftsmen might have possessed tube drills tipped with jewels or other hard materials, but even with such tools, the precision and speed of cutting seems remarkable. Similar questions arise from the sarcophagi found in various Egyptian temples and tombs. Massive boxes carved from single blocks of granite or basalt with perfectly flat internal surfaces and precise right angles at the corners. The lid of the sarcophagus in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid is broken, revealing a clean, straight fracture that looks almost like it was cut with a saw. Some researchers have argued that creating these sarcophagi would require stone-cutting tools made from materials harder than the granite itself, possibly diamond-tip tools or cutting systems using abrasive slurries. While ancient Egyptians certainly used copper saws with sand as an abrasive, experiments with these techniques have produced results that do not quite match the precision found in ancient work, leading to ongoing debates about exactly what methods were employed. These debates matter because they affect our understanding of ancient capabilities and the levels of sophistication achieved by early civilizations in working with difficult materials. As sleep pulls you deeper, rest in the knowledge that mysteries remain unsolved and that the past continues to surprise us with evidence that challenges our assumptions. The discovery of ancient concrete that still endures after 2,000 years the finding of stainless steel-like metals in contexts where they should not exist, the presence of purple dyes whose chemical composition we cannot quite replicate. All these remind us that ancient technology was not primitive but merely different from our own, solving problems through methods that we have sometimes forgotten or never learned. Our ancestors possessed deep knowledge of materials and processes, understanding accumulated through centuries of experimentation and experience. And while they lacked our scientific theories and mechanical tools, they achieved results that remain impressive even when judged by modern standards. The technologies of the past deserve respect and study, not dismissal as crude or simple, for they represent human ingenuity applied to the challenges of survival and expression in ways that worked within the constraints and opportunities of their times. In the borderland between waking and dreaming, let your mind wander into the realm of mythology, those ancient stories that have been dismissed as primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena or justify social structures, but which might contain within them memories of real events transformed by centuries of oral tradition into symbolic narratives. Every culture possesses a rich heritage of myths and legends, stories about gods and heroes, creation and destruction, journeys and transformations. While we often read these tales as pure fiction or symbolic expression, some researchers have suggested that myths might preserve actual historical memories, encoded in narrative form and passed down through generations, changing in the retelling but maintaining a core of truth about events that occurred in the distant past. This approach to mythology, sometimes called ehemerism after the ancient Greek writer Ehemerus, who proposed that gods were originally historical figures later deified, offers a way of reading myths not as fantasy but as distorted history. The flood myths found in cultures around the world provide perhaps the most striking example of a story pattern that appears too widespread and too similar to be pure coincidence. The biblical story of Noah and the Ark is the most familiar version to Western audiences, but similar tales appear in Mesopotamian literature, in ancient Greek mythology, in Hindu texts, in Native American traditions, and in the folklore of Pacific Islands. These stories typically describe a great deluge that destroys most of humanity, with one righteous man and his family surviving in a boat, often bringing with them pairs of animals to repopulate the world after the waters recede. The similarities between these accounts have led some researchers to propose that they all derive from a common source, a memory of an actual catastrophic flood that affected early human populations and became embedded in cultural memory across different societies. The question is, what flood could have been significant enough to create such enduring memories, and how those memories could have spread so widely? One possibility involves the rapid sea level rise that occurred at the end of the last ice age when melting glaciers released enormous quantities of water into the oceans. This process was not gradual and smooth, but included periods of rapid change when ice dams holding back vast glacial lakes suddenly collapsed, releasing devastating floods that would have appeared apocalyptic to any humans in their path. The flooding of the Black Sea, which some geologists believe occurred catastrophically when rising Mediterranean waters breached the Bosporus and inundated what had been a large freshwater lake, could have displaced substantial populations living around the lake's shores and created traumatic memories that entered oral tradition. Other researchers point to evidence of enormous floods in various regions at different times, suggesting that flood myths might not all derive from a single event but represent independent memories of local catastrophes that happen to share similar narrative structures because floods naturally inspire certain responses and generate certain types of stories. As you rest in perfect peace, let the stories of ancient floods wash over your consciousness like gentle waves, neither accepting nor rejecting their historical content, but simply acknowledging that they tell us something important about how our ancestors experienced and remembered their world. The myths describe not just floods, but also the destruction and renewal of civilization, the loss of a previous age, and the survival of a remnant who must rebuild. These themes resonate across cultures because they speak to universal human experiences of catastrophe and recovery, of knowledge lost and wisdom preserved. Whether or not the myths record specific historical events, they express truths about the human condition, about our vulnerability to forces beyond our control, and our capacity to survive and adapt in the face of disaster. The ancient storytellers who shaped these tales were not historians in our sense, but they were attempting to preserve and transmit knowledge about the past, using the tools available to them in oral cultures where story and song were the primary means of maintaining cultural memory. The myth of Atlantis, beyond its literal interpretation as the story of a lost island, might represent a broader theme of civilizational collapse that appears in many cultural traditions. The ancient Greeks told of a golden age when gods and humans lived together, followed by successive ages of silver, bronze, and iron, each declining from its predecessor. The Hindu concept of yugas describes vast cycles of time during which civilization rises and falls repeatedly, with ages of enlightenment followed by ages of darkness in an eternal pattern. The Maya believed in multiple creations and destructions of the world, with humanity being formed and destroyed several times before the current age. These cyclical views of history differ from the linear progressive narrative that dominates modern Western thought, where we imagine a steady upward climb from primitive origins to advanced civilization. The cyclical view suggests instead that humanity has risen and fallen multiple times, that our current civilization is not the first to achieve sophistication, but merely the latest in a series, and that we too might fall if we are not careful to preserve what we have learned. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on water as we consider myths that might preserve memories of ancient astronomical events, such as the story of Phaethon from Greek mythology. Phaethon, the son of the sun god Helios, convinced his father to let him drive the chariot of the sun across the sky for one day. Unable to control the powerful horses, Phaethon drove too close to the earth, scorching the lands and creating deserts, before Zeus struck him down with a thunderbolt to prevent the destruction of the entire world. Some researchers have suggested this myth might preserve the memory of a comet or meteor impact, a celestial event that brought fire from the sky and caused widespread devastation. While such interpretations remain speculative, they highlight the possibility that myths might encode observations of real phenomena, expressed in the language of gods and heroes, because ancient peoples lacked the scientific vocabulary to describe astronomical events in mechanical terms. The ancient Sumerians told stories of the Anunnaki, divine beings who came from the heavens and taught humanity the arts of civilization, including agriculture, metallurgy, and writing. These gods were not abstract spiritual entities but physical beings who interacted with humans, ruled over cities, and sometimes mated with human women to produce hybrid offspring. Taken literally, such stories sound like the plot of a science fiction novel, describing extraterrestrial visitors who uplifted primitive humans. Most scholars interpret the Anunnaki myths as religious allegories, expressions of how ancient people understood the origins of knowledge and the relationship between humanity and the divine. Yet the persistence of these stories, their detailed narratives, and the seriousness with which they were treated by ancient cultures has led some fringe researchers to propose that they might contain memories of actual contact with advanced beings, whether extraterrestrial visitors or survivors of an earlier human civilization who possessed superior knowledge. While such ideas remain far outside mainstream archaeology and history, they illustrate how myths can be read on multiple levels, as religious texts, as literary creations, or as potential historical documents encoded in symbolic language. As your breathing becomes slower and deeper, drawing you down into the restful depths of sleep, let us turn our attention to the idea that throughout history certain groups have served as keepers of ancient knowledge, preserving and protecting wisdom from earlier ages. The concept of hidden or secret knowledge passed down through initiatory traditions appears in many cultures, from the mystery schools of ancient Greece and Egypt to the esoteric teachings of various religious and philosophical movements. These traditions claim to possess knowledge that is not shared openly with the uninitiated, teachings that must be earned through study, discipline, and spiritual development. While modern skeptics often dismiss such claims as pretentious mystification or deliberate obscurantism, we should consider the possibility that in ages before mass literacy and universal education, specialized knowledge genuinely was restricted to small groups who had the training to understand and apply it correctly. The ancient Egyptian priesthood maintained control over writing, mathematics, and scientific knowledge, with these skills being taught only within temple schools to those destined for religious service. The priests served as scribes, engineers, astronomers, and physicians, roles that required education in reading, calculation, and specialized technical knowledge. By restricting access to these skills, the priesthood maintained their power and social position, but they also ensured that knowledge was preserved and transmitted accurately from one generation to the next. The temples functioned as repositories of learning, housing libraries of papyrus scrolls containing medical texts, mathematical problems, astronomical tables, and ritual instructions. When foreign conquerors invaded Egypt, or when political instability disrupted the temple system, this knowledge was at risk, and indeed much was eventually lost when the temples were closed and the ancient traditions were suppressed during the Christian era. The last inscriptions in hieroglyphic script date to the 4th century CE, after which the ability to read the ancient writing died out completely, not to be recovered until the 19th century when scholars finally deciphered the hieroglyphs using the Rosetta Stone. The Pythagorean school in ancient Greece operated as both a philosophical community and a mystery cult, with members sworn to secrecy about the teachings they received. Pythagoras and his followers investigated mathematics, music, astronomy, and cosmology, discovering relationships and patterns that they believed revealed the fundamental structure of reality. The Pythagorean theorem, the mathematical relationship between the sides of a right triangle, is the most famous surviving contribution from this school, but the Pythagoreans explored many other areas of knowledge and developed a worldview that combined mathematical rigor with spiritual significance. They believed that numbers were not just tools for calculation, but embodied cosmic principles, that understanding mathematics was a path to understanding the divine order of the universe. This perspective, which might seem strange to modern sensibilities that separate science from religion, was natural in a cultural context where knowledge was unified rather than divided into separate domains of inquiry. As your consciousness fades into the gentle twilight of approaching dreams, consider the medieval alchemists who worked in secret laboratories trying to transmute base metals into gold, to discover the elixir of life, and to create the philosopher's stone. Alchemy has been dismissed as a pseudoscience, a misguided precursor to chemistry characterized by mystical thinking and impossible goals. Yet recent historical research has revealed that alchemy was more sophisticated than this caricature suggests, that alchemists made genuine discoveries about the nature of matter and chemical processes, and that their symbolic language, while difficult for modern readers to penetrate, encoded real experimental knowledge. The alchemical quest for transmutation, understood metaphorically, represented a search for transformation and perfection that operated on both material and spiritual levels. The work in the laboratory was meant to mirror inner work on the self, with the purification of metals corresponding to the purification of the soul. This integration of practical experimentation with spiritual discipline seems foreign to modern science, which strives for objectivity and separates facts from values, but it represented a different approach to knowing, one that did not divorce the investigator from what was being investigated. The possibility that ancient wisdom might be preserved within secret societies and esoteric traditions has inspired both genuine seekers and conspiracy theorists, leading to a vast literature that mixes historical fact with speculation and fantasy. Organizations like the Freemasons claim lineages extending back to the medieval guilds of stonemasons who built the great cathedrals of Europe, and through them to the Knights Templar, and even to the builders of Solomon's Temple. While historians question many of these claimed connections, viewing them as mythological origin stories created to lend prestige and mystery to organizations that actually have more recent origins. The Masonic traditions do preserve symbolism and ritual elements that appear to derive from older sources. The tools of stonemasonry, the compass and square, become in Masonic teaching symbols of moral and spiritual principles. The building of physical temples becomes a metaphor for the construction of spiritual character. Whether or not Freemasons possess literal ancient secrets, they maintain a tradition of using craft symbolism as a vehicle for philosophical and ethical teaching, a practice that may indeed connect back to the medieval craft guilds where knowledge of geometry and proportion was essential to the work. Let your mind rest easy with the thought that knowledge moves through history in many channels, some open and public, others restricted and hidden, and that the survival of wisdom depends on communities of people dedicated to preserving and transmitting it. Libraries and universities serve this function in the modern world, but throughout most of history, knowledge was preserved through apprenticeship, through oral transmission within families or specialized groups, through secret teachings passed from master to student. This personal transmission of knowledge allowed for quality control, ensuring that students had the character and ability to use what they learned responsibly, but it also meant that knowledge could be easily lost if the chain of transmission was broken. Every time an elder died without passing on their knowledge, every time a tradition was disrupted by war or persecution, valuable information disappeared from human civilization. The knowledge that has survived to reach us represents only a fraction of what was once known. The tip of an iceberg whose bulk lies hidden beneath the waters of time, irretrievable except perhaps through archaeology, or through the fortunate discovery of texts and artifacts that preserve fragments of what was lost. In the deep quiet of night, as your body releases the tensions of the day and your mind begins its journey into sleep, let us explore the possibility that catastrophic events have periodically disrupted human civilization, setting back progress and destroying accumulated knowledge. The archaeological and geological record reveals that the Earth has experienced dramatic changes in climate, sudden shifts in sea level, massive volcanic eruptions, and impacts from celestial objects that have periodically reshaped the environment and challenged the survival of life. These catastrophes would have had devastating effects on human populations, potentially destroying civilizations and forcing survivors to rebuild from remnants, losing much of what previous generations had learned. If we accept that such events have occurred, then human history might be punctuated by discontinuities, moments when the thread of cultural transmission was cut and knowledge was lost only to be slowly and painfully reaccumulated by later generations. The Younger Dryas period, a sudden return to glacial conditions that occurred approximately 12,800 years ago, just as the world was warming from the last ice age, represents one such potential catastrophe. For reasons that remain debated, temperatures plunged and ice sheets advanced again, persisting for more than 1,000 years before warming resumed. This climatic reversal would have been devastating for human populations that had begun to adapt to warmer conditions and develop early agricultural practices. Some researchers have proposed that the Younger Dryas was triggered by the impact of a comet or asteroid that broke into multiple fragments and struck the Earth, causing fires, climate disruption, and mass extinctions. Evidence for this impact hypothesis includes a layer of sediment dating to the beginning of the Younger Dryas that contains elevated levels of certain elements and microscopic spherules that might be impact debris, along with a dramatic decline in large animal populations and changes in human settlement patterns. While the impact hypothesis remains controversial and not all scientists accept it, the proposal has gained support from various lines of evidence and offers an explanation for the sudden onset of the Younger Dryas cooling. If a major impact did occur at the end of the Ice Age, it would have had catastrophic consequences for any human civilizations existing at that time. The direct effects of impacts, including blast waves, fires, and tsunamis if the fragments struck oceans, would have killed many people immediately. The longer-term climate effects, the onset of the younger Dryas cooling, would have disrupted food supplies and forced populations to relocate or adapt to rapidly changing conditions. In such chaos, social structures could collapse, knowledge could be lost, and survivors might be reduced to subsistence living, unable to maintain the achievements of their predecessors. This scenario offers one possible explanation for why we do not find more evidence of sophisticated prehistoric civilizations. They might have existed, but been wiped out by a catastrophe that left few traces, with survivors scattering and losing much of their cultural knowledge in the struggle to stay alive. Later generations would have had to begin again, slowly rebuilding civilization without clear memories of what had come before, retaining only myths and legends that hinted at a lost golden age. As you drift in the space between thoughts, imagine the sky filled with fire, fragments of a shattered comet streaking through the atmosphere, impacting in a chain across the planet's surface. The northern ice sheets, struck by these cosmic projectiles, would have released massive amounts of meltwater, raising sea levels and flooding coastal settlements. Dust and debris thrown into the atmosphere would have blocked sunlight, causing temperatures to plummet and crops to fail. In such conditions, only the most resilient human groups would have survived. Those who managed to find shelter, secure food supplies, and maintain some semblance of social cohesion through the disaster. The memory of such an event would have burned itself into human consciousness, preserved in stories of fire from the sky and catastrophic floods, tales of a world that ended and a new world that began from the ashes of the old. Could the flood myths we explored earlier represent cultural memories of the catastrophes that marked the transition from the Ice Age to the present interglacial period? The Toba supervolcano eruption that occurred approximately 75,000 years ago provides another example of a global catastrophe that had profound effects on human populations. When Toba, located in modern Indonesia, erupted, it released more than 600 cubic miles of ash and rock, making it one of the largest volcanic events of the past 2 million years. The eruption would have had immediate devastating effects in the surrounding region, but its global impact came from the massive quantities of ash and sulfur dioxide ejected into the stratosphere. These materials reflected sunlight and caused a volcanic winter that lasted for years, with global temperatures dropping significantly and causing widespread ecosystem disruption. Some scientists have proposed that the Toba eruption created a population bottleneck in human evolution, reducing our species to just a few thousand breeding individuals who survived the harsh conditions. Genetic evidence shows that human genetic diversity is relatively low compared to other primate species, consistent with our having passed through a period when our population was very small. While debate continues about the severity of Toba's effects and whether it truly created a near-extinction event, the eruption certainly demonstrates that volcanic catastrophes can have planet-wide consequences. Let your breathing slow and deepen as we consider that the Earth's history is marked by periodic mass extinctions, events when large percentages of species disappeared in geologically short periods of time. The most famous of these is the extinction that ended the age of dinosaurs 66 million years ago, caused by the impact of a massive asteroid in what is now Mexico. The collision released energy equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs, creating a crater more than 100 miles across and throwing enormous quantities of rock and dust into the atmosphere. The resulting climate disruption, including darkness, cooling, and acid rain, led to the collapse of food chains and the extinction of roughly 75% of all species on Earth. While this event occurred long before humans existed, it demonstrates that impacts large enough to end dominant life forms do occur, and that the Earth's surface remains vulnerable to cosmic bombardment even though the rate of impacts has decreased since the early solar system when collisions were more frequent. Humanity has been fortunate during recorded history to avoid any truly catastrophic impacts or supervolcanic eruptions, though we have witnessed smaller events that still had significant consequences. The eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia in 1815 was the largest volcanic event in recorded history, ejecting so much material into the atmosphere that it caused the year without a summer in 1816, when temperatures across the northern hemisphere dropped and crops failed, leading to food shortages and suffering. The smaller Krakatoa eruption in 1883 created tsunamis that killed tens of thousands and produced atmospheric effects that were observed around the world. These historical events remind us that volcanic activity remains a threat, and that an eruption on the scale of Toba could occur again, potentially devastating modern civilization, which depends on stable climate patterns and global agricultural systems. Similarly, while the risk of a major asteroid impact in any given year is very small, over long time periods, the probability approaches certainty, and the consequences of such an impact would be catastrophic for human civilization, unless we develop the technology to detect and deflect dangerous objects before they reach the Earth. As sleep embraces you fully and carries you into its peaceful realm, let us contemplate the possibility that ancient peoples designed their monuments not just as buildings but as expressions of cosmic principles, creating architecture that reflected their understanding of the universe and humanity's place within it. The greatest ancient structures were not merely functional spaces, but sacred landscapes, carefully planned and executed according to principles that integrated astronomy, geometry, mathematics, and spiritual symbolism. These buildings served as teaching tools, as calendars, as places where heaven and earth met, where the eternal patterns of the cosmos could be observed and celebrated. To understand these monuments properly, we must try to see them through the eyes of their creators, to appreciate that they embodied entire worldviews, and that their form and orientation carried meanings that went far beyond simple architectural preferences. The temples of ancient Egypt were designed as models of creation, with their floor plans and decorative programs following cosmological principles that represented the emergence of order from chaos. The pylon gates at the entrance to Egyptian temples represented the horizon, the place where sun rises, symbolizing the boundary between the mundane world and the sacred space within. Passing through this gateway, visitors entered a courtyard open to the sky, then proceeded through increasingly darker and more restricted spaces, moving deeper into the temple toward the sanctuary where the god's image resided. This progression from light to darkness, from open to enclosed, from public to private, mirrored the journey from the manifest world to the hidden divine source. The columns that supported the temple roof were carved to resemble papyrus plants or lotus stems, transforming the interior into a symbolic representation of the primordial swamp from which creation emerged. The ceiling was painted with stars and astronomical scenes, making the temple interior a microcosm of the universe itself, a space where the patterns of creation were made visible and accessible. The orientations of Egyptian temples were carefully calculated to align with significant celestial events or to point toward important geographical features. The Temple of Karnak at Luxor is aligned so that during the winter solstice, the sun rises directly along the temple's main axis, illuminating the sanctuary. This alignment was not accidental but deliberate, chosen to connect the temple with the solar cycle and to mark the sun's rebirth at the darkest time of year. Other temples were oriented toward the rising of specific stars, particularly Sirius, whose appearance just before dawn in midsummer heralded the annual flooding of the Nile and the beginning of the Egyptian agricultural year. By linking their temples to these celestial events, the Egyptians created monuments that functioned as intermediaries between earth and sky, places where the eternal cycles of the heavens touched the human world and gave meaning to earthly existence. Let your thoughts float freely as we journey to Cambodia, where the vast temple complex of Angkor served not just as a religious centre but as a terrestrial map of the cosmos. The 5 towers of Angkor Wat represent Mount Meru, the cosmic mountain that stands at the centre of the universe in Hindu and Buddhist cosmology. The surrounding moat represents the cosmic ocean that encircles the world. The temple's proportions encode mathematical relationships found in Hindu scripture, with the dimensions and measurements reflecting cosmological time cycles and the distances between heavenly realms. Walking through Angkor Wat, a devotee would have experienced not just a physical journey through a building, but a symbolic journey through the universe itself, ascending from the earthly realm toward the divine mountain where gods dwell. The bas-reliefs covering the walls depict scenes from Hindu mythology, including the famous churning of the ocean of milk, a creation myth in which gods and demons cooperate to generate the elixir of immortality, causing both wonderful and terrible things to emerge from the cosmic ocean in the process. The cosmic orientation of Angkor Wat is evident in its precise alignment with celestial events. During the spring equinox, an observer standing at the western entrance sees the sun rise directly over the central tower, marking the moment when day and night are equal and the world is in balance. This alignment was no accident, but a deliberate feature of the temple's design, requiring careful astronomical observation and mathematical calculation to achieve. The Khmer builders who created Angkor possessed sophisticated knowledge of astronomy and geometry, understanding that they could encode cosmic patterns into architecture and create buildings that served as three-dimensional diagrams of universal principles. This approach to architecture, where buildings function as models of the cosmos, appears in many ancient cultures and suggests a worldview quite different from modern Western thought. We tend to see buildings as structures serving human purposes, but ancient architects saw them as participation in divine patterns, as ways of bringing the order of heaven down to earth and creating spaces where humans could align themselves with cosmic harmony. As you rest in perfect tranquility, let your imagination wander to the stone circles of prehistoric Britain, where ancient peoples raised standing stones to mark the horizons and track the movements of sun and moon. These monuments required enormous labour to construct, with some stones weighing many tons and being transported from distant quarries. The builders must have had powerful reasons for undertaking such efforts, reasons rooted in their understanding of the cosmos and the importance of marking and celebrating celestial cycles. The orientations of stone circles towards solstice and equinox sunrises and sunsets demonstrate that their creators possessed detailed astronomical knowledge, accumulated through generations of observation and passed down through oral tradition and practical demonstration. These monuments were not primitive, crude attempts at astronomy, but sophisticated instruments, built with precision and serving complex purposes that we can only partially reconstruct from the stones that remain. The medicine wheels found across the North American plains, circular arrangements of stones with lines radiating from central cairns, bear striking resemblance to stone circles on other continents, suggesting either cultural contact or independent development of similar ideas about how to mark sacred space and celestial events. Some medicine wheels align with solstices, others with the rising points of particularly bright stars. These monuments demonstrate that indigenous American cultures developed sophisticated astronomical knowledge and created physical structures to embody and preserve that knowledge. The wheels served ritual purposes, marking places where ceremonies could be performed at appropriate times determined by celestial cycles, connecting human activity with the greater patterns of the cosmos. This integration of human life with natural and celestial cycles appears in traditional cultures around the world and represents a fundamentally different relationship with time and space than what characterizes modern industrial civilization. We track time with mechanical precision, dividing it into identical units that have no connection to natural phenomena. Ancient peoples experienced time as qualitative, with different moments having different characters determined by the positions of celestial bodies and the rhythms of the seasons. As your mind drifts deeper into the realm of dreams, let us consider what might be lost when knowledge passes from one culture to another, when ideas are translated into new languages and adapted to different contexts. The transmission of knowledge across cultural boundaries is never perfect, with meanings shifting and nuances being lost or transformed in the process. When civilizations fall and their languages die out, the knowledge encoded in their texts becomes inaccessible unless someone preserves the ability to read and understand them. Throughout history, this process of loss and recovery is repeated many times, with wisdom being forgotten and later rediscovered, sometimes in forms quite different from the original. The history of ideas is not a straight line, but a tangled web of transmission, transformation, and occasional recovery of what seemed permanently lost. The knowledge of ancient Greece was largely lost to Western Europe during the early medieval period, but was preserved and expanded upon by Islamic scholars in the Middle East and North Africa. While European learning languished during the Dark Ages following the fall of Rome, Arab and Persian scholars translated Greek philosophical and scientific texts into Arabic, studied them intensively, and made their own contributions to mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and other fields. Scholars like al-Khwarizmi developed algebra, Ibn al-Haytham advanced optics and experimental method, and Ibn Sina wrote medical texts that synthesized Greek and Islamic medical knowledge. These works, written in Arabic, eventually made their way back to Europe through Spain and Sicily, where they were translated into Latin and helped spark the intellectual revival that led to the Renaissance. However, this process of translation and retranslation introduced errors and confusions, with concepts sometimes being misunderstood or distorted as they passed from Greek to Arabic to Latin, each translation being influenced by the cultural assumptions and intellectual frameworks of the translators. Consider what happens when a technical term from one language lacks a direct equivalent in another. Translators must either invent a new word, use an approximation that carries somewhat different connotations, or provide lengthy explanations that might not fully capture the original meaning. Ancient texts discussing natural phenomena often use terminology rooted in philosophical frameworks quite different from modern science, making translation into contemporary language problematic. When we read ancient texts in translation, we are not accessing the thoughts of the original authors directly, but experiencing them filtered through the understanding of translators who might be separated from the source material by vast distances of time, culture, and worldview. The more profound and subtle the original ideas, the more likely they are to be distorted or simplified in translation, with the risk that what seemed clear and meaningful in the original becomes obscure or even meaningless when rendered into another language. As your breathing becomes soft and regular, carrying you deeper into rest, reflect on the fact that many ancient texts survive only in fragments or in copies made centuries after the originals were written. Each time a manuscript was copied by hand, errors could creep in through simple mistakes, misreading of unclear handwriting, or deliberate changes made by scribes who thought they were correcting errors or who wanted to make the text conform to their own understanding. Over many generations of copying, texts could drift substantially from their original forms, with words being changed, passages being added or omitted, and meanings shifting in subtle ways. When we read ancient texts today, we are often reading the products of textual scholarship that attempts to reconstruct original texts from multiple variant copies, choosing between different readings and trying to determine which version is most authentic. Scholarly detective work is essential, but also involves judgment calls and educated guesses, meaning that our understanding of ancient knowledge rests on reconstructions that might not perfectly match what ancient authors actually wrote. The burning of the Library of Alexandria symbolizes the fragility of knowledge and the catastrophic consequences of losing repositories of learning. While no single event destroyed the library, It declined over centuries through various disasters, deliberate attacks, and eventually the closure of pagan institutions as Christianity became dominant. With its destruction, hundreds of thousands of scrolls were lost, containing works of science, philosophy, literature, mathematics, and history from across the ancient world. We know the titles of many lost works from references in surviving texts, tantalizing mentions of books about mathematics, astronomy, geography, and other subjects that might have expanded our understanding of ancient knowledge but which are now gone forever. Some of these lost works might have contained information that took centuries to rediscover, or that remains unknown to us even today. The loss of the Library of Alexandria reminds us that knowledge, despite seeming permanent when written down, is actually quite vulnerable, dependent on physical objects that can be destroyed, and on communities of readers who can preserve and transmit what is written. Let your mind rest with the understanding that what we know about ancient civilizations represents only a fraction of what those civilizations knew about themselves. The majority of ancient texts have been lost, either through deliberate destruction, natural decay, or simple neglect. What survives is bias towards certain types of texts, particularly religious and political documents, that were copied many times or inscribed on durable materials like stone. Technical manuals, scientific treatises, and everyday documents were less likely to be preserved, creating gaps in our knowledge of ancient technology and science. Archaeological discoveries occasionally fill these gaps, as when the Dead Sea Scrolls revealed previously unknown religious texts, or when excavations at Herculaneum recovered a library of philosophical works carbonized but preserved by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Each such discovery reminds us how much remains unknown, and suggests that future finds might reveal aspects of ancient knowledge that would surprise and challenge our current understanding of what ancient peoples knew and believed. As sleep deepens and the boundary between conscious thought and dream becomes blurred, let us explore the curious fact that similar ideas, symbols, and structures appear in widely separated cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other. Pyramids rise in Egypt, in Mexico. Flood myths appear in Middle Eastern, Greek, Indian, and Native American traditions. Dragons or serpents feature prominently in Chinese, European, and Mesoamerican mythology. Solar deities and solar symbols appear in virtually every ancient culture. The question is whether these similarities arise from independent development, from shared human psychology that naturally generates similar symbols and ideas, or from actual historical contact and knowledge transmission between cultures that we have not adequately recognized. Each explanation has implications for how we understand human history and the development of civilization. The independent development explanation suggests that human minds facing similar challenges and questions naturally arrive at similar solutions and create similar symbolic representations. Pyramids might arise independently as the most stable structure for creating monumental architecture without sophisticated engineering, a form that naturally suggests itself when stacking stones into a large permanent structure. Flood myths might reflect common experiences of devastating floods in river valleys where early civilizations developed, with each culture developing its own narrative to explain and remember these catastrophes. Solar deities might emerge naturally because the sun is the most obvious and important celestial body, the source of light and heat that makes life possible, naturally leading different cultures to worship and personify it. This explanation emphasizes the common features of human psychology and the limited set of responses available to people facing universal existential questions about creation, death, natural forces, and the nature of the divine. The shared human psychology explanation gains support from patterns identified by Carl Jung and other depth psychologists, who propose that certain symbols and themes arise from the collective unconscious, a shared substrate of human mentality that generates archetypal images and narratives across cultures. The hero's journey, the wise old man, the great mother, the shadow, and other archetypal figures appear in the myths and stories of cultures around the world, suggesting that they emerge from fundamental patterns in human consciousness rather than from historical borrowing. The pyramid might be an archetypal form representing the axis mundi, or world axis that connects earth and heaven, a symbol that arises naturally from the human experience of verticality and the observation that mountains reach toward the sky. The serpent or dragon might represent the unconscious, the chthonic forces that lie beneath conscious awareness, naturally appearing in mythology as a creature of the depths, whether underwater or underground, that must be confronted by the hero. While this psychological explanation is compelling, it does not fully account for specific details and similarities that seem too precise to attribute to pure independent development. As you float in the gentle sea of approaching dreams, consider the possibility that some ancient cultures did have contact with each other, sharing knowledge and symbols through trade networks, maritime exploration, or migration that left little trace in the archaeological record. The discovery of Roman coins in America, Chinese anchors off the California coast, cocaine in Egyptian mummies, and other anomalies suggest possibilities of ancient contact that mainstream scholarship has been reluctant to accept, partly because such findings are often poorly documented or ambiguous, and partly because they challenge established narratives about the isolation of ancient cultures. Yet we know that human beings have been remarkably mobile throughout history, crossing vast distances by land and sea in search of resources, trade opportunities, or new homes. The Polynesian settlement of islands across the Pacific demonstrates that ancient peoples were capable of extraordinary maritime journeys, navigating thousands of miles of open ocean to discover and colonize remote islands. If Polynesians could accomplish such feats, might not other cultures have done similar things? The similarities between pyramids in Egypt and Mesoamerica have long fascinated researchers and sparked speculation about possible connections. Both regions developed pyramid construction independently according to mainstream archaeology, with the Egyptian pyramids reaching their peak during the Old Kingdom around 2600 BCE and the Mesoamerican pyramids developing millennia later starting around 1000 BCE. The pyramids serve different purposes in the two regions, with Egyptian pyramids primarily functioning as royal tombs and Mesoamerican pyramids serving as temple platforms, and they differ in construction techniques and internal arrangement. Yet the basic form remains similar, a massive stone structure with square base and triangular sides, oriented according to cardinal directions and often associated with astronomical alignments. The conventional explanation for this similarity is that the pyramid represents an optimal form for monumental architecture that naturally arises when cultures reach a certain level of social organization and technical capability. The alternative explanation, that some form of knowledge transfer occurred between the Old World and the New World in ancient times, remains controversial but cannot be entirely dismissed given the anomalous evidence mentioned earlier. The quipu, the knotted cord recording system used by the Inca, presents an intriguing parallel to the counting rods and knotted cords used in ancient China, despite the immense distance separating these cultures. Both systems use knots or beads on cords to record numerical information and possibly linguistic content, representing a similar solution to the problem of information storage in societies that had not developed writing as we usually understand it. The similarities might arise from independent development, as knotted cords represent an obvious way to record numbers by creating physical markers that can be counted. Yet some researchers have suggested that the similarities might indicate ancient contact between Asian and American cultures, perhaps through maritime connections across the Pacific. While genetic evidence shows that Native Americans descended from populations that migrated from Asia across the Bering Land Bridge during the Ice Age, the possibility of later contacts through maritime routes remains open and would help explain certain cultural similarities and anomalous archaeological findings. Let your thoughts dissolve into the peaceful darkness of sleep as we acknowledge that the question of ancient contact and cultural diffusion remains open, with evidence pointing in multiple directions and allowing for multiple interpretations. Perhaps the truth involves some combination of independent development, universal human psychology, and actual historical contacts that occurred through routes and methods we have not yet fully recognized. The ancient world might have been less isolated than we imagine, with knowledge and ideas flowing between cultures through networks of trade, migration, and exploration that connected distant regions in ways that left only subtle traces in the archaeological record. As we continue to study ancient cultures with increasingly sophisticated methods, combining traditional archaeology with new techniques like DNA analysis, satellite imagery, and computer modeling, we may discover evidence that reshapes our understanding of ancient connections and forces us to revise our mental maps of how knowledge moved through the ancient world. As you rest in complete peace, let consciousness fade gradually like the last light of evening, while we contemplate the idea that history moves not in a straight line but in cycles, with civilizations rising and falling in recurring patterns that have repeated throughout human existence. This cyclical view of time appears in many ancient philosophies, from the Hindu concept of yugas spanning millions of years, to the ancient Greek idea of eternal recurrence, to the Mayan belief in successive creations and destructions of the world. These traditions understood history not as progressive advancement towards some ultimate goal, but as the endlessly repeating dance of creation and dissolution, building and collapse, knowledge gained and knowledge lost. From this perspective, our current civilization represents merely one turning of the great wheel, not fundamentally different from or better than previous turnings except in superficial details of technology and social organization. The archaeological record seems to support a cyclical pattern, at least within recorded history, showing that civilizations do indeed rise to great heights of cultural achievement and then decline into periods of disorder and reduced sophistication. The Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE saw the simultaneous or near-simultaneous fall of multiple major civilizations around the Eastern Mediterranean, including the Hittite Empire, Mycenaean Greece, and the Egyptian New Kingdom, ushering in a dark age that lasted several centuries before new political orders emerged. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century CE led to the early medieval period in Europe, when literacy rates plummeted, urban populations declined, long-distance trade networks broke down, and technological knowledge was lost in many areas. These collapses were not total, with some continuity maintained through institutions like the Christian Church and with some regions experiencing less disruption than others, but they represent real discontinuities in cultural development, periods where knowledge and capabilities declined rather than advancing. The causes of civilizational collapse have been much debated by historians and archaeologists, with proposed explanations including environmental degradation, climate change, disease, invasion by nomadic peoples, internal political conflicts, and economic failures. In most cases, collapses result from multiple interacting factors rather than single causes, with stressed societies becoming vulnerable to disruptions that they might have weathered in better times. The Maya collapse, for instance, seems to have involved drought conditions that stressed agricultural production, leading to political instability and warfare as city-states competed for declining resources, ultimately resulting in the abandonment of major cities and the fragmentation of Maya civilization. The environmental factor, drought combined with the political factor, competition between cities, to create conditions where the system could no longer maintain itself and broke down. Understanding why civilizations collapse is not just an academic question but has practical importance for our own time, as we face environmental challenges, resource depletion, and political stresses that could potentially threaten the stability of modern global civilization. As your breathing becomes slow and effortless, imagine the wheel of time turning through its endless cycles. each civilization confident in its permanence and sophistication, unable to imagine that it too will one day crumble into ruins. The builders of great monuments believed they were creating structures that would last forever, proclaiming the power and glory of their rulers to all future generations. Yet those monuments now stand in silence, the civilizations that created them long gone, their languages dead, their beliefs forgotten except by scholars who laboriously reconstruct them from fragmentary evidence. What seems permanent and inevitable in the present reveals itself as temporary and contingent when viewed from the perspective of deep time. The cities that dominate our world today will someday lie in ruins, puzzles for future archaeologists if human civilization survives long enough to wonder about us. The knowledge we accumulate with such effort will be lost if we do not take care to preserve it in forms that can survive catastrophes and be understood by people who might not share our languages, technologies, or cultural frameworks. The question arises whether anything can be learned from the pattern of rise and fall, whether there is some way to break the cycle and create truly lasting civilizations. Some thinkers have proposed that civilizations fall because they fail to adapt to changing conditions, becoming rigid and unable to respond creatively to new challenges. Others suggest that growth itself contains the seeds of decline, as expanding civilizations develop complex structures and dependencies that eventually become unsustainable, leading to collapse when the system can no longer support its own weight. The ecologist Joseph Tainter proposed that civilizations collapse when the marginal return on investments in complexity becomes negative, when increasing social complexity costs more than it delivers, in terms of problem-solving ability, causing people to abandon complex institutions in favor of simpler forms of organization. From this perspective, collapse is not a catastrophe but a rational response to the excessive costs of maintaining complexity, a simplification that allows societies to reorganize on more sustainable foundations. Let your mind drift freely through the possibility that our current global technological civilization represents something genuinely new in human history, a level of interconnectedness and knowledge accumulation that might allow us to break free from the cycle of rise and fall that has characterized previous civilizations. Our ability to record and transmit information has grown exponentially with the development of printing, electronic media, and digital networks, making knowledge much more difficult to lose entirely even if particular centers of learning are destroyed. Our understanding of history gives us the chance to learn from previous collapses and potentially avoid the mistakes that brought down earlier civilizations. Yet we also face challenges on a scale never before encountered, including anthropogenic climate change, weapons of mass destruction, and the possibility of technological disruptions that could destabilize social systems faster than we can adapt to them. Whether our civilization proves more resilient than its predecessors, or whether we too will eventually join the cycle of rise and fall remains to be seen, a question that will be answered by the choices we make in the coming decades and centuries. The idea of eternal return, most fully developed in the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, suggests that we should live as if everything that happens will recur infinitely, repeating in exactly the same way through eternal cycles of cosmic time. While few modern people take this idea literally, it serves as a powerful thought experiment, asking us to consider whether we would affirm our lives if we knew we would have to live them again and again forever, making the same choices, experiencing the same joys and sufferings without variation. This perspective transforms how we think about value and meaning, suggesting that we should find significance not in some ultimate destination or final achievement, but in the eternal present, in the recurring cycles of life, death, and rebirth that characterize existence at all scales, from individual organisms to civilizations, to perhaps even the cosmos itself. The ancient wisdom traditions that emphasized cyclical time might have grasped something profound about the nature of reality that our modern progressive narrative causes us to overlook, a recognition that there is no final end point, no ultimate completion, but only the endless turning of the wheel. As you sink into the deepest levels of rest, where consciousness dissolves into pure awareness without content, let us reflect on the ancient idea that beneath the apparent chaos and multiplicity of the world lies a hidden harmony, an underlying order that connects all things. This concept appears in various forms across different philosophical traditions, from the Pythagorean notion of the music of the spheres, to the Chinese idea of the Tao as the underlying pattern of the cosmos, to the Hindu concept of Brahman as the ultimate reality from which all apparent multiplicity emerges. These traditions suggest that the visible world of separate objects and events is less fundamental than the invisible patterns and principles that structure reality, and that true knowledge involves grasping these hidden patterns, rather than being deceived by surface appearances that suggest separateness and chaos. The ancient Pythagoreans believed that number was the fundamental principle of reality, that mathematical relationships structured the cosmos and could be discovered through reason and observation. They found that musical intervals corresponding to simple numerical ratios produced harmonious sounds, with the octave corresponding to a 2-3-1 ratio, the perfect fifth to 3-2, and the perfect fourth to 4-3. This discovery suggested that beauty and harmony were not subjective preferences, but objective features of reality, rooted in mathematical proportions that could be precisely calculated. The Pythagoreans extended this insight beyond music to astronomy, proposing that the planets moved in orbits that corresponded to musical intervals, creating a cosmic symphony, or music of the spheres that human ears could not hear but that expressed the fundamental harmony of creation. While this specific theory proved incorrect when astronomy developed more accurate models of planetary motion, the underlying intuition that mathematical patterns structure physical reality turned out to be profoundly true, vindicated by modern physics, which describes the fundamental laws of nature in mathematical terms. The golden ratio, approximately 1.618, appears throughout nature in the spiral patterns of shells, the arrangement of seeds in sunflowers, the proportions of the human body, and countless other contexts. This mathematical constant also appears in art and architecture from many cultures, suggesting that ancient peoples recognized its aesthetic appeal and its connection to natural forms. The Parthenon in Athens incorporates the golden ratio in its proportions, as do many Renaissance paintings and countless other works where the ratio might have been used consciously or intuitively. Some researchers have argued that the Great Pyramid of Giza encodes the golden ratio in its dimensions, though this claim remains disputed and might represent coincidence or projection of modern mathematical ideas onto ancient structures that were actually designed using different principles. Regardless of specific cases, the widespread appearance of the golden ratio and other mathematical constants in both nature and human creation suggests that there are indeed underlying patterns that structure both the physical world and human aesthetic sense, lending support to the ancient idea that beauty reflects objective cosmic principles rather than mere subjective taste. As your awareness fades into the borderless expanse of sleep, consider that modern physics has in some ways returned to the ancient intuition that reality is fundamentally unified despite its apparent multiplicity. Quantum mechanics reveals that particles separated by vast distances can remain connected through entanglement, influencing each other instantaneously in ways that defy classical intuitions about the separateness of objects in space. General relativity shows that space and time are not fixed containers but dynamic aspects of a unified space-time that bends and curves in response to matter and energy. The search for a theory of everything in physics represents an attempt to show that all the fundamental forces and particles emerge from a single underlying principle, a unified field or structure from which the apparent multiplicity of nature arises. While this scientific program uses mathematical and experimental methods quite different from the philosophical speculation of ancient sages, it pursues a similar goal, seeking to find the one behind the many, the simple truth beneath complex appearances. The ancient Chinese concept of the Tao, the way, describes an ineffable principle that underlies all existence, generating the endless transformations of the world while itself remaining unchanging. The Tao Te Ching, the foundational text of Taoism attributed to Lao Tzu, begins by stating that the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao, emphasizing that ultimate reality transcends all descriptions and concepts. Yet the text goes on to describe how the Tao manifests in the world through its spontaneous action, Wu Wei, an effortless activity that accomplishes everything without force or striving. Water serves as a recurring metaphor in Taoist texts, exemplifying the Tao through its softness that overcomes hardness, its tendency to seek the lowest places, and its ability to adapt to any container while retaining its essential nature. These poetic descriptions point toward an understanding of reality that sees opposition and difference as complementary rather than contradictory, recognizing that apparent opposites like hard and soft, high and low, active and passive define each other and transform into one another in endless cycles. The I Ching, or Book of Changes, another foundational Chinese text, presents a system for understanding transformation and finding guidance in situations of uncertainty. The text consists of 64 hexagrams, each composed of 6 lines that are either broken or unbroken, representing yin-yang, the fundamental complementary principles that generate all change and variety in the cosmos. By consulting the hexagrams through the casting of yarrow stalks or coins, practitioners sought insight into the patterns of the moment and appropriate courses of action. While modern readers might dismiss this as superstition, the I Ching can be understood as a sophisticated system for thinking about change, encouraging careful attention to context, timing, and the dynamic nature of situations. The hexagrams and their accompanying texts offer a vocabulary for describing different types of situations and their potential developments, a way of recognizing patterns that repeat across different domains of experience. In this sense, the I Ching represents an attempt to map the hidden harmony of change itself, the patterns by which situations evolve and transform. Let sleep claim you completely now, as we acknowledge that ancient wisdom traditions approached knowledge differently than modern science, valuing intuition, contemplation, and direct experiential insight alongside observation and reasoning. These traditions taught that understanding the cosmos required not just intellectual study, but transformation of the person doing the studying, cultivation of virtues and qualities that allowed one to perceive more deeply and clearly. The hidden harmony could not be grasped by the ordinary mind caught up in attachments and delusions, but only by consciousness that had been refined through meditation, ethical practice, and spiritual development. This emphasis on the connection between knowledge and virtue, understanding and being, represents a dimension of ancient wisdom that modern epistemology tends to overlook in its focus on objective methods that supposedly work regardless of the moral or spiritual state of the investigator. Perhaps the ancients understood something we have forgotten, that some kinds of knowledge require not just correct methods, but appropriate human development, and that the deepest truths about reality reveal themselves only to consciousness that has been properly prepared to receive them. As the night reaches its deepest hour and you rest in perfect stillness, let us draw together the threads of this journey through time and mystery, reflecting on what we have explored and what questions remain open as we drift toward the final release into sleep. We have wandered through landscapes of stone and symbol, examined monuments that defy easy explanation, considered maps that seem to show impossible knowledge, and pondered the possibility that human history is far older and more complex than conventional narratives suggest. We have entertained ideas that challenge mainstream archaeology and history, not because we demand that every controversial theory be accepted, but because the mysteries are real, the questions genuine, and the evidence sufficiently ambiguous that certainty remains elusive. The past is not a settled matter, but an ongoing investigation, a puzzle with missing pieces and conflicting clues that allow for multiple interpretations. The monuments scattered across our world stand as silent testimony to human aspiration and achievement, to the drive to create lasting structures that transcend individual lifetimes and carry meaning across generations. Whether these monuments encode lost knowledge from vanished civilizations or represent the independent achievements of the cultures traditionally credited with building them, they demonstrate capabilities and understanding that command respect and wonder. The precision with which ancient peoples carved stone, the accuracy with which they aligned buildings to celestial events, the scale of labor they organized and sustained, all point to societies that possessed sophisticated knowledge and powerful motivations. We may never know with certainty exactly how the Great Pyramid was built, or why ancient peoples transported massive stones across great distances to create monuments like Stonehenge. But these enduring mysteries invite us to question our assumptions about the past and remain open to possibilities we might otherwise dismiss. The question of whether advanced civilizations existed in prehistory and were later lost to catastrophe or decline cannot be definitively answered with the evidence currently available. The archaeological record is incomplete, biased toward what survives and what happens to be discovered, leaving vast gaps in our knowledge of ancient human activity. If sophisticated cultures arose and fell during the Ice Age or in the period immediately following it, much of their evidence could lie buried beneath sediments, submerged under risen seas, or scattered so widely through abandonment and catastrophe that we struggle to recognize it for what it is. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, particularly when we consider how much of the Earth's surface remains unexplored or inadequately surveyed. Future discoveries may well reveal evidence that reshapes our understanding of prehistory, showing that the development of civilization followed a more complex path than the simple narrative of steady progress from primitive to advanced. Or future research might reinforce conventional chronologies while explaining mysteries through better understanding of ancient capabilities and methods. The questions remain open, inviting investigation rather than dogmatic certainty. As your breathing becomes soft as whisper and consciousness fades to the barest flicker, consider that the true value of exploring these mysteries might lie not in arriving at definitive answers, but in the journey of questioning itself, in the cultivation of wonder and the recognition that we do not know everything, that the past holds secrets we have yet to uncover. The ancient monuments, mysterious artifacts, and controversial theories serve as reminders that reality exceeds our current understanding, that the story we tell ourselves about human history is provisional and subject to revision. This recognition of uncertainty, far from being a weakness, represents a strength, an intellectual humility that keeps us open to new evidence and willing to revise beliefs when confronted with compelling reasons to do so. The person who claims absolute certainty about the past, who insists that all questions have been answered and all mysteries explained, closes themselves off from the possibility of learning and discovering. Better to dwell in productive uncertainty, asking questions and following evidence wherever it leads, than to rest comfortably in unexamined assumptions that might blind us to truth. The architects of time, whether they were the civilizations traditionally recognized by historians or earlier unknown cultures whose traces have nearly vanished, left us a gift in the form of monuments and artifacts that pose questions we must still struggle to answer. These enigmas serve as invitations to wonder, to imagine possibilities beyond the boundaries of established knowledge, to entertain ideas that challenge conventional wisdom. We honor the ancient builders not by solving all their mysteries, reducing their achievements to simple explanations that rob them of their power to inspire, but by allowing their works to remain partly mysterious, recognizing that some questions might never be fully answered, and that this unknowing is itself valuable. The pyramid that keeps its secrets, the map that hints at impossible knowledge, the artifact that seems out of place in time, all serve to remind us that human history is deeper and stranger than we can easily comprehend. that our ancestors possessed capabilities we might not fully understand, and that the past continues to speak to us in voices we are only beginning to learn how to hear. Let the gentle darkness of complete rest embrace you now as we acknowledge that our journey through these mysteries has been not a search for final answers, but an exploration of possibilities, an opening of imagination to the richness and complexity of human history. The evidence we have examined allows for multiple interpretations, and honest investigators can look at the same monuments, artifacts, and documents and arrive at different conclusions about their meaning and significance. This multiplicity of interpretation is not a failure, but reflects the genuine ambiguity of the evidence and the limitations of our current knowledge. Future discoveries and new methods of analysis will continue to illuminate the past, answering some questions while raising others, maintaining the endless conversation between present and past that defines historical inquiry. We who live now are the temporary custodians of the questions bequeathed to us by ancient mysteries, and we in turn will pass those questions, refined and expanded by our own investigations, to future generations who will pursue them with methods and perspectives we cannot predict. The night deepens, and sleep's embrace grows complete as we come to the end of our journey through time and mystery, through monuments and myths, through questions that have no easy answers. May you rest peacefully, with thoughts of ancient wonders, of civilizations that rose and fell, of knowledge that was gained and lost, and sometimes found again. May you dream of standing stones under star-filled skies, of pyramids glowing in desert sunlight, of temples hidden in jungles and cities lost beneath the waves. May you carry with you the recognition that the world is older and stranger than we imagine, that human history extends far beyond what written records preserve, and that the past continues to shape the present in ways both obvious and subtle. The architects of time, whoever they were, built monuments that endure and pose questions that persist across millennia, connecting us to ancestors we will never fully know, but whose presence we can still feel in the stones they raised and the knowledge they preserved. As consciousness fades and you slip into the peaceful realm of sleep, may you find rest in the certainty of mystery, the comfort of questions that invite exploration, and the wonder of a past that remains forever partly beyond our grasp, yet forever calling us to understand. Sleep now, and in your dreams perhaps you will walk through ancient cities, hear voices speaking forgotten languages, and glimpse for just a moment the wisdom of those who came before, the architects of time who shaped our world in ways we are only now beginning to comprehend. Rest well, and know that the mysteries will wait for you, patient as stone, ready to reveal their secrets to those who seek with open minds and hearts full of wonder. The ancient monuments stand guard over questions that span the ages, and as long as humans exist to ask them, those questions will continue to call us back to the past, to search among ruins and artifacts for traces of truth about who we are and where we came from. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with visions of the deep past and its enduring mysteries.